Hello again, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Liberty Watch. I'm your host, Liberty Man Van. Now, in our last episode, we started our discussion entitled Socialism versus Communism. And it got a little long-winded, so I had to split it into two episodes. So this is the second part 2 of that episode. Let's get started. Our next article highlights a current problem that's occurring in Venezuela. This is a good example of a current day socialist system that was put into place by Hugo Chavez right around 2000-ish and carried forward. And Venezuela, if you don't know, they're sitting on a pile of oil. Okay, they have some of the largest oil reserves in the world. I think they're even larger than Saudi Arabia. And before Chavez came to power, it was privately owned. After he came to power, though, he was a socialist. He liked Fidel Castro. He was big buddies with Fidel. So when he came to power, he started instituting this socialist way of doing things. And they took over the oil company. Now it's state-owned. And they basically proceeded to run it into the ground. And the result has been that recently and this is not even covered by the media hardly. Why? You don't think we have a socialist-leaning media when they've got there's a socialist disaster in Venezuela and they're not even covering it? You probably don't even know about this, do you? You know, there's people down there killing dogs and cats and rats and whatever they can get a hold of to eat. It's a mess. It's a big, big mess. Let's get to the article. All right. Now, this one is from the FEE.org website, Foundation for Economic Education. And it's entitled, Venezuela Proves There Is No Political Freedom Without Economic Freedom. Remember, we already talked about that. To the article. The impact that the field of economics has on our daily lives is not easily recognized by the majority of people. Preoccupied with our immediate needs and daily tasks, the state of the economy not only seems disconnected from our lives, it feels almost completely irrelevant. But economics is intrinsically connected to almost every single aspect of our lives. Am I going to get that new sweater? Or will I pay for a couple of months of Netflix instead? Well, you're not going to have those kind of choices with socialism. Economics is intrinsically connected to almost every single aspect of our lives, from the clothes we wear, to the food we eat, to our jobs and our education. Economics is in all things, and without economic freedom, there can be no liberty, period. You can't divorce the two. It has always been peculiar to me that socialists believe so fervently in social freedom and yet detest economic freedom. You know, Bernie Sanders, he's so concerned about everybody, you know, wants to take care of them. You know, not realizing that in taking care of people, you're also enslaving them. You're taking away their freedom. If the government's taking a big chunk out of your paycheck every month or every pay period to pay for Social Security and Medicare when you get old, and sure, that sounds great in theory. The problem is you don't get to save for your own retirement anymore. Okay, you can do it in addition to Social Security. But you have fewer funds to do it with. You don't get to control how that money's invested. All right, so you just have less control. And the state has more control of you because the less money you have in your pocket, the fewer choices you have. All right? This is why many proponents of socialism and other forms of state control will advocate for economic restrictions without a concern for civil liberties. But once economic control has been seized by the government, the stripping of our individual rights will soon follow. The situation in Venezuela has become so dire, it would fit perfectly into the plot of any dystopian novel. What started as an economic crisis has now escalated to a humanitarian nightmare of which there appears to be no end in sight. This is happening right here in 2017. Started last year, the year before. It's been going on for a while. And another sad part of this story is they actually had democratic elections in Venezuela, and the people voted for these clowns that came in and tried this socialism business. So even democracy is no guarantee you're not going to end up with socialism if people don't educate themselves and vote the right way and not vote for people that believe in liberty. At its height, the country was capable of producing 3.5 million barrels of oil per day. Like I said, Venezuela is sitting on a big old pile of oil, and now they can't even get it out of the ground to feed the people. But after Chavez came to power and an oil worker strike ensued, the leader decided to fire those on strike and instead bring in workers who were loyal to his government. And after years of continued mismanagement and poor decision making at the hands of the state, the oil output began declining significantly. Fast forward, now we have food and necessities like toilet paper not only in short supply, they are also completely under state control. Those wanting to acquire these items must wake up long before the sun has risen and stand in long lines. That makes them real productive too, doesn't it? Standing in a line. Getting a lot of work done that way, aren't they? While waiting in these lines, these quote-unquote consumers, if you can still call them that, are sitting ducks for thieves. It has become common for thugs and others with malicious intent to hold people at gunpoint and rob them of whatever wealth they have left. Last year, one man was killed in line in an attempt to guard his cell phone. Meanwhile, as he lay dying, the line did not break. Because to lose your place in line, even to attend to the wounded, meant that you may not get to feed your family. Bad choices, huh? So do I help this guy maybe save his life, or nah, I really need that toilet paper? Despite the astronomical body count and failures of socialism, it continues to get a lot of support in Western countries, particularly from the media, academia, and from Hollywood. Okay? They give a lot of support for socialism, and here's an example straight off the presses from our beloved MIT Press. That's right, one of our institutions of higher learning. Well, what are they promoting? A children's book entitled Communism for Kids. I wonder if they go into a gulag in the book. Somehow I don't think they do. So, what is communism? The children's book tells us the following. Communism names the society that gets rid of all the evils. People suffer today in our society under capitalism. There are lots of different ideas about what communism should look like. But if communism means getting rid of all the evils of capitalism, then the best kind of communism is the one that can get rid of the most evils. Wow. And what is capitalism, ladies and gentlemen, according to this MIT children's book? It says the following. Capitalism exists today all over the world, and it's called capitalism because capital rules. In capitalism, there are certainly people who have more power than others, but there isn't a queen who sits on a throne high above society and commands everybody. So if people no longer rule over society, who does? The answer may sound a little strange. Things do. They're just the things that people create to make life easier, to serve them. Strangely, over time, people forget that they made those things, and soon enough, people begin to serve the things. Wow. So we're ruled over by our stuff. I wonder if our stuff has ever executed anybody for disagreeing with them. I wonder if our stuff has killed 150 million people and counting. I mean, really. But this is the kind of hogwash that people like Bernie Sanders and people who believe in that ideology push on us. Our next article comes from the Zero Hedge website, and it's entitled, Millennials Prefer Socialism to Capitalism. And the article is based on a website called victimsofcommunism.org. And they did a report at that website. The report was entitled, The Annual Report on U.S. Attitudes Towards Socialism. And as you can see from this next graphic, 44% of millennials prefer socialism over capitalism. But do they actually know what it means? Now, the previous graphic asked if you knew what socialism means, but as you can see from the next graphic, 70% of Americans as a whole are confused about what socialism is. Now, I'm going to give the American people a little bit of a pass here on being confused between socialism and communism because, hey, there's a lot of different definitions and there's a lot of overlap between the two, as we saw earlier. But the victimsofcommunism.org, let's look at their definition of communism. It says the following. Socio-economic order structured upon the common ownership of the means of production in the absence of social classes, money, and the state. So that was like Marx's definition of socialism, right? The kind of the end product of where he said he thought socialism, that there would be a transition from capitalism to communism, and that transition period in between capitalism and communism would be called socialism. And then communism would be when the state withered away. That last phase that he said he wanted the world to get to. Wow, you know what that means? That means Karl Marx was an anarchist. The definition of anarchy is when there's no state. So he's advocating for anarchy. That's got to be the news story of the century. Have you ever heard anybody say that besides Liberty Man Van? The truth is, he knew better. He knew the state just wouldn't wither away. I'm calling bull spanarkle on him there. Let's continue. But what the communism that we see in Russia and North Korea is more like one of the other definitions of communism we saw, which is a totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls state-owned means of production. And this confusion about what is socialism, the definitions of socialism and communism, there's an article in Britannica about this, and they can understand the confusion. And they make the following observation. Exactly how communism differs from socialism has long been a matter of debate, but the distinction rests largely on the communist adherence to the revolutionary socialism of Karl Marx. Like most writers of the 19th century, Marx tended to use the terms communism and socialism interchangeably. Marx identified two phases of communism that would follow the predicted overthrow of capitalism. The first would be a transitional system in which the working class would control the government and economy, yet still find it necessary to pay people according to how long, hard, or well they worked. So the transition socialism in Marx's mind would be, okay, we still got, these people are doing, these guys are doing heart surgery. This guy's a janitor. I guess we'll have to pay the guys doing heart surgery a little bit more. And of course, somebody in the state's going to have to determine how much all these people get paid. They're also going to determine who gets to be certain jobs. That's no longer determined by individuals but by the state. But anyway, now in this next graphic we're going to juxtapose the definitions of communism, socialism, and fascism. Notice how the definitions of communism and socialism do not include any mention of force, while fascism includes dictatorial power and forceful suppression of opposition. Now, why could that be? Why do we have a soft version definition of socialism and communism that doesn't include anything about force or gulags, but fascism does? People are worried about fascism, and fascism is bad too. That's also top-down control. But with fascism, you still have private property. With fascism, you still have private property, but it's tightly controlled by the state. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Have you heard of, I don't know, the EPA? Or, I don't know, any of these other alphabet soup of government agencies that tightly control everything that the private sector tries to do? That's fascism. That's one of the characteristics of fascism. All right. Yet we see in practice that socialist regimes are all about the use of force. Remember Mao's Cultural Revolution and Stalin's gulags? And that's not surprising when we consider that it's based on force. Socialism is based on force. It's not surprising when we consider Marx's phrase, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. In other words, if you're able to produce more than you need, and this person over here is not able to produce enough, we're going to take it from you and give it to them. We could really take Marx's phrase, from each according to his ability, and by the way, to each according to his needs. Who's going to determine what people's needs are? Well, the ruling elite, as we've already seen before. You're still going to have a ruling elite here. This is not an egalitarian setup at all, as Marx would have you believe. Did he really think it could be achieved without force? No. This flies against human nature. And when you fly against human nature, you're going to have to do it by force, as we said before. Now let's get to the punchline of this annual report on U.S. attitudes towards socialism. More millennials would prefer to live under socialism than capitalism, as you can see by this graphic. Another alarming finding of this survey is that the millennials are least unfavorable towards communism. Now, how can this be? 150 million dead and counting, that millennials, our youngsters, newly minted from our educational system, would have such a favorable view of socialism. Could it be, I don't know, that the educational system is also controlled by the state and there's a lot of socialist-leaning people in the state? Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. This whole movement toward public education came along in the late 19th and into the early 20th century. And it was the progressives, during the progressive era, that this came into being. And they copied it from the Prussians. All right? They just went over and copied like what they were doing and copied it. So we've got their system, educational system. And you got people coming out of this educational system that have no clue about economics or socialism and communism and how evil it is. This next graphic shows the percent in each age bracket that correctly said communism had killed 100 million or more. And finally, there's one more type of socialism, I'll put that in quotation marks, socialism, that we need to talk about, which is practiced in the so-called social democracies of the West. And it doesn't meet the strict, and this type of socialism is when you have these social programs, like socialized medicine, for example, free health care for everybody. And it doesn't meet the strict definition of socialism because it happens in countries that have capitalism and private property. But even though it's not strictly socialism, it has a lot of the same damaging effects. Let's take, and some of the examples of these programs in the United States are Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Medicare being health care for the elderly, Medicaid, health care for the poor, and Social Security is just a pension plan for everybody that's taken out of your, and these are all funded by taxes, of course. And the most recent kind of social program that was enacted in the United States was called Obamacare. The Affordable Health Care Act was the name, Obamacare for short. It was passed during the Obama administration. And it'll just illustrate a lot of the problems with these type of programs. What happened when this law was passed is that now, if you have a pre-existing condition, you can't be excluded from buying insurance. Okay, that sounds nice, you know, great. Shouldn't people be able to buy insurance? The problem is, it's not insurance anymore. Okay, insurance is something you buy to protect against something that may happen in the future. You buy life insurance because you might get killed all of a sudden and you want to take care of your family. Okay, you can't buy the life insurance after you're dead, can you? Same thing with auto insurance. You can't buy auto insurance after you've wrecked your car. So the problem with allowing people who are already sick to buy insurance is that that's going to make the premiums go up. And the premiums went up dramatically after this Obamacare was passed. Why did the premiums go up so much? Because now the insurance company are going to have to pay out all these claims for people that are sick and wait until after they're sick to buy health insurance. So the responsible people who bought health insurance prior to Obamacare are having to pay for people who were irresponsible and didn't buy health insurance. And so that's just one of the many problems with these kind of social programs. So these type of programs, you see a loss of individual freedom. Like if they're taking money out of your paycheck to put it into Medicare, okay, they're taking it out of your paycheck before, you get a chance. So they're spending the money the way they think you ought to spend it. So you lose the freedom of being able to spend your paycheck the way you think it ought to be spent. So any of these type of social programs, and they're also become very manipulated by special interests. Like in the Obamacare illustration I just gave you. You had prior to the legislation being passed, you had the insurance companies, the American Medical Association, the hospitals, big pharmacology companies, all these people were in the back room back there influencing this legislation. So that's the type of cronyism that's going to occur with these programs as well. So we should reject all these type of programs for the socialism that they are. Now, because socialism involves central planning, I will close with this following funny video.
Retweet. Congress is the worst.
Right?
They just fight and don't actually deal with any of the world's problems.
Stalemate City. Hashtag.
We should just give one guy, all the power and say, here, figure it out. Benevolent kings are still a thing, right?
What? That would be terrible.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
If your leader has a vision and wants things done his way, then everybody be serving like 40s Germany. You'd see the leaders get fiery in their weird grey suits, or bushy beard hairdos. Serfdom USA.
I'm not saying we need a dictator.
Yeah, just like a group of people who have the country's best interests at heart.
Maybe it starts during a crisis, or 'cause you're damn lazy. But someone makes a big promise, and you think that sounds sweet. But how they do it, a planned economy, till everybody's gone Serfdom USA. And they'll all be planning out your route you're gonna take real soon. From your job to goods prices, experts write your to-dos. But if their plans are a bomber, you just can't get away. Tell your friends here is Serfdom USA. It's not always so great when you leave your decisions to other people.
But can you tell us about subjective value, marginalism in price theory, and the economic calculation problem?
Here, just read this.
Dude.
Serfdom USA. Serfdom USA.
And that's our show for today. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed it, tell a friend. Join our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to it. You can also go to my blog. That's at libertymanvan.com, and that will give you the transcript version of these episodes, and they'll also contain links that you can click on to see the video. Glad you could join us, and be sure to join us next time on Liberty Watch, where we don't believe you need some guy with a bullhorn to tell you what to do.